Me again, everyone! So, for my next Costalk, I'm going to be talking about Stargate SG-1. Why am I talking about Stargate SG-1? Because I'm watching it, because lockdown has got boring, and I'm rewatching old programmes. Obviously, a lot of it is boring military uniforms. I don't really want to talk about military uniforms. I'm going to talk about the alien organisations / factions that we get presented. The big three. The Jafar, the Goa'uld, and the Tok'ra. Although briefly, on the boring military uniforms, fun fact, lots of guns used in TV and films are actually airsoft guns, realistic imitation firearms. And you can tell this because a lot of the gas-powered ones will have a little kind of gas filling port on the bottom of the magazine, or sometimes you see a little cog winder thingy for winding up a spring magazine. And quite often you'll see these in films and TV. Anyway, that's not what I want to talk about, despite the fact that I'm talking about it. Interestingly, Stargate actually does kind of do one thing quite well. They don't reuse costumes very much. Now, a lot of TV shows and movies will reuse costumes. It's always just a cost-saving measure, really, and if an extra has worn something in, one programme about the Tudors, then an extra can wear it in another programme about the Tudors. It is, however, a little more obvious in sci-fi and fantasy, I think, where the designs don't necessarily look historical. For example, Star Trek, you'll see a lot of stuff that's reused within itself, but the designs are quite unique. You'll also see that after a big movie, all the series will get an updated uniform, because they're just reusing them. And of course there's things like the infamous Starship Troopers uniforms that were used in Starship Troopers, Power Rangers, Firefly, and maybe something else, I can't remember. But Stargate doesn't actually do this too much, probably because instead they've just bulk made a lot of costumes that a lot of different characters wear, such as all the Jafar uniforms. I mean, obviously all the Jafar don't actually exist. Sometimes you get the extras actually CG'd in for the big scenes, but yeah, you get the same uniforms. Now, I get it, they are kind of treated as commodities, so a warlord might take over and take control of their rivals' soldiers, but still, if I was in charge of a troop, I wouldn't let them wear all the same armour as the opposing army will wear. I'll be like, right guys, you're gonna have to splash some paint on your uniform or wear a coloured headband or something, not just have the little mark on the forehead denoting which overlord you belong to. I think it's just asking for trouble. I mean, I've done like airsoft, paintball, wargame things, and we were all dressed in green overalls, so about 6 of us from the same side were having a shootout for about 5 minutes before the ref just came over and said, no guys, this is embarrassing, please stop. I do get it though, you've got to dress up a load of people, you want all the same thing, and the costumes are actually pretty cool. I think you can't see any obvious kind of inspiration for it, which I quite like. They are obviously so alien, so different, it's really cool, and unlike a lot of sci-fi armour, say the Cardassians in Star Trek, you don't have an obvious point where there is a join, and so the armour bends really awkwardly. Because obviously all this armour, it's made from, like, rubber. You can see it flex when they move, which isn't the end of the world, but it's still going to be sturdier than a strip of Velcro or a zip, so all of it might flex slightly, and then you'll have a join point that just goes vroom. But you don't get that so much in Stargate. They've actually gone for realistic joining methods, such as having the side skirty bits lace up. And it's lower tech, sure, and you can see, oh, they definitely lace that up. But in my mind it works better. I find it less breaking of the immersion, because I feel like a hidden join is more a challenge for me to find, whereas an obvious join is like, oh yeah, cool, that's a stylistic choice. I don't know, maybe that's just me. My favourite bit, though, of the Jafar armour, and I have to talk about this because I'm not allowed to talk about this in my household anymore, the knitted chainmail. Oh yes. I mean, if you're gonna design an outfit where everyone has to have a full chainmail undersuit, what are you gonna do? That's gonna be heavy, it's gonna rub like heck and jingle between your thighs, it's gonna creep in your rear, it's not nice. But I'm not sure that wearing a full knitted bodysuit is actually going to be pleasant for the actors. I do feel kind of sorry for them. That That must have been warm. It's old Monty Python style knitted stuff though, and if anyone wants to make that, it's actually quite simple. You'll need to use knitting needles a bit bigger than you think. I usually use 6 to 8 mil knitting needles for chainmail. Use a single double knit yarn in grey, very importantly grey, and then dry brush or spray paint over the top. It does lead to problems. Like in Stargate, you can see from some angles the paint doesn't reflect properly, or it just hasn't gone into the cracks, and so their knitted chainmail does just look like grey knit. But, you know, it's a nice, quick, easy, and above all cheap way to do chainmail, as long as you don't mind the slightly retro look now. And you can sit there and do it while watching TV, and I've done that before. It's actually quite fun and soothing. But the creators obviously weren't happy with the knit, because you do see it get replaced slowly. Interestingly, you don't see it replaced slowly with proper chainmail, like traditional 4-in-1 European style chainmail. You see it replaced with butcher's mail, with that kind of weird chainmail-esque fabric made from little squares that's featured quite a lot in clubwear these days. And even just sparkly fabric. Like at one point Braytac has just a sparkly cloak, which I think we're meant to think is metal. I don't know. I can see though why they'd shift to some characters like Braytac and Teal'c having robes instead. It seems a lot easier than making people struggle into the chainmail, you know, the knitted chainmail trousers and top, and a lot lighter and a lot cooler. And I know I've just said that I really like the Jafar armour and am now just ripping it to shreds, but that is what I do with things I like. However, one of the things that I didn't ever really like about it was the giant animal heads. I mean, okay, they look kind of cool, but suddenly you're 8 feet tall, and doorways aren't. You've got a thing up to about here, maybe. Doesn't look very comfy. I don't know how they see out of those. I assume they had hidden eye holes. Yeah. The CG on them was actually really good, especially for the time. But, yeah, I'm glad they got rid of those. Especially since, moving into the gold, you got a lot in the early seasons who were just in gold versions of that. And that looked a bit boring after a while. I mean, yeah, I get it, it continues the militaristic look, but I much prefer when the costume designers got to go full, over-the-top, campy, sci-fi from, you know, that era kind of, we're going to make everything ridiculous style outfits. The Egyptian ones, just to start, I mean, robes and colours and gems and jewels, eyeliner for days, you know, it's, oh, fantastic. I love stuff like this. I'm pretty sure Stargate is why I have loved over-the-top villain outfits for, you know, forever. I do think it's a bit of a shame when they then go into some of the other mythologies and have characters from different cultures, or that made different culture, I don't know. And you get the ones like, I mean, okay, Baal and that, Hathor, they still look pretty good. Hathor's definitely Egyptian, I don't know why I mentioned that. Baal still looks pretty good. I was super excited when we had our first Celtic Gould come in with Camillus, and he's in like brown. I don't know, maybe from where I'm from we just have boring mythology and we have a lot of brown, but I feel like they've gone over the top with everyone else. They could have given us something more exciting there. Kronos' armour is a PVC leatherette monstrosity. I would not feel very cool or stylish wearing that. I'd rather wear like a nice tunic with a nice edging. I don't know. Amaterasu is probably one of my biggest disappointments, because Amaterasu has been shown really nicely in a lot of depictions before. You know, Shinto sun goddess, you'd expect flames and golds and reds, and maybe they thought that'd look too similar to the gold Yu who she arrives with in one of the episodes. Or maybe they thought she'd look a bit too similar to Hathor, but yeah, I was a bit disappointed by that outfit. Osiris as well moves away from the Egyptian side, but I don't quite see that in her character, if you get what I mean. She's still got a lot of, like, style to her. She sits there in her robes, really cool, but they are a bit plain. I feel like most of the non-Egyptian ones are kind of uncosplayable. Not because the outfits are difficult, but because some, like Kronos, you'd look like you're wearing bad fancy dress. Some, like Amaterasu and Osiris, I think people would only get it if you were in a big group of other Stargate cosplayers, because otherwise they look quite generic. Whereas I think the Egyptian ones, they were established enough and their costumes were interesting enough that you can actually get away with wearing them. Otherwise, pretty much it's like having a generic outfit and a hand device, and that's not the best for cosplay. I have heard people complain that they thought Anubis's look was really boring and lazy, and I really disagree with this. I think where every other baddie is flamboyantly decked out in jewels, having one who then is much more simply dressed really adds to the menace of the character. I mean, don't get me wrong, some things were still a bit ridiculous, but the outfit was really cool, and I dread to think how many meters went into that. If you look closely, he's not just wearing a black robe, it is layers upon layers of different robes, and there must be so much fabric in there just to give it this baggy shape, because when he sat down or stood up, you don't see, oh yes, that's a person. You just see this big mass of fabric. I think that's really well done. The face shield as well, I assume he had some kind of face shield that they then CG'd on top of. I think that's a really nice touch. Works really well, obviously, for his character, having, eschewed his physical form as such. And then finally there's the Tok'ra. And I don't sadly have much to say about the Tok'ra, which in itself is saying a lot, because unlike their more villainous counterparts, they dress really simply. I mean, so I guess this implies that it's not the gold symbiote itself that wants to be flamboyant, but it's evilness that makes one flamboyant. Like, maybe, subjugation and lust for beadwork go hand in hand. I don't know. I mean, I do get it. We've got the classic counterpart here. We've got the bright colours versus muted. We've got the satins and taffetas of the gold versus the linens and cottons of the Tok'ra. We've got nice finishing versus rough edges, impractical versus practical. We've got the classic good and evil, or overlord and resistance, although they're usually treated the same, let's be honest. I would have still liked to see some differences in the costumes. I mean, we do get that the Tok'ra have a society, they have bedrooms rather than barracks, they have some time to express their own individuality, I think. Especially I'd like to see it in some of the more major Tok'ra characters like Selmak, just to see his personality. I mean, guess which one of these is the main character here? None of them, obviously, but they all dress like that, so it didn't really matter what picture I showed you there. So yeah, I do feel like the Tok'ra let the side down a little bit. It's just one of those things. Other than that, the costumes are actually all pretty simple to make. They were made back in an era when we didn't necessarily have some of the technologies that we have now for costume making specifically, so you won't get as many kind of 3D printed parts, you won't get too many custom printed fabrics. It was obviously also done on a budget in places, which makes it more approachable. If you're looking to do these yourself, I do recommend checking out sites like the RPF, I'll put a link below, just because, now it's old enough that this is old ground, and lots of people have been there before, and lots of people are happy to help with those kind of things. And in a way, all these alien characters are actually easier to make than the military uniform. I mean, the military uniforms are best to just buy, because you can buy most of those parts, but you'd have to make a lot of the alien characters yourself, which is half the fun for me. Anyway, thanks for listening all, or watching, I suppose. Big thanks to all my patrons, it's much appreciated, you're really helping me through a difficult time right now, and I appreciate all the support. If any of you would like to consider supporting me, please do check out my Patreon page, I'll leave a link below, and otherwise please do like, subscribe, and watch my other videos. See ya!